The Grand Rotunda of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any known species. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, and the walls were lined with the flags of 412 member civilizations. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, and the air always smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers from a world no human had ever visited. Han Jisoo stood at the lowest podium in the chamber. It was smaller than all the others, made of plain gray metal, instead of the polished stone the full members received. A tiny plaque on its side read, "Provisional Member, Earth." She had stood behind this podium for 6 years. Before her, 11 other human ambassadors had stood in the same spot, going all the way back to the day Earth first made contact with the galaxy, 42 years ago. Not one of them had ever been allowed to stand anywhere else. Today the Council was discussing a new hyperspace corridor. It was a fast travel route that would cut thousands of light years off the journey between the inner colonies and the outer rim. It was also going to pass directly through Earth's sovereign space. Jisoo had not been told about this before the session. No one had asked Earth's opinion. She found out when Speaker Olvin read the proposal aloud to the full chamber as though it were already decided. Olvin was a Marathi, tall and thin, with skin like dark blue glass. He spoke with the slow confidence of someone who had never once been interrupted. His voice filled the rotunda easily. "The corridor will be operational within 2 standard cycles," he said. "Construction drones will begin placement of relay beacons immediately. All member species will benefit from reduced transit times." Jisoo pressed the button on her podium that requested speaking time. Olvin glanced at it the way someone might glance at a fly landing on their food. "The representative from Earth wishes to speak," Olvin said. He did not hide his disinterest. Jisoo leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Speaker. Earth would like to formally object to the proposed corridor. The planned route passes through our recognized territorial space. Under Section 14 of the Sovereignty Provisions, any infrastructure project within a member species territory requires prior consultation and consent. Earth was not consulted." The silence lasted about 2 seconds. Then the laughter started. It came from the upper tiers first, where the oldest and most powerful species sat. The Buri delegation, led by Trade Lord Fennec, laughed the loudest. Fennec was short and round, with golden fur and small black eyes that always looked like they were calculating something. He leaned over to the delegate beside him and said, loudly enough for the microphones to catch, "The little ones think they have territory." More laughter followed. It spread across the chamber like a wave. War Marshal Dukkha of the Tasari Dominion did not laugh. He simply looked down at Jisoo from his high podium with an expression of pure contempt. Dukkha was enormous, even by Tasari standards, with armored skin the color of iron. He spoke without requesting permission. Perhaps the humans should focus on learning to build ships that do not fall apart before they lecture this council on sovereignty. The laughter doubled. Some delegates stamped their feet or made sounds that Jisoo's translator could only describe as amusement, hostile. Jisoo did not move. She did not look away. She waited until the noise died down, and then she spoke again, her voice perfectly level. "Earth's objection is formally entered into the record. We request that it be preserved in full." Speaker Olvin smiled. It was the kind of smile that was worse than an insult. "Your objection is noted and irrelevant, Ambassador. That is the privilege of your provisional status. The motion carries. This session is concluded." The chamber began to empty. 412 species filed out through their designated exits, talking among themselves, already forgetting the moment. To them, it was nothing. A small species had made noise, and the noise had been ignored. It happened all the time. Jisoo gathered her documents. Her hands were steady. Her face showed nothing. She walked out through the narrow corridor, reserved for provisional members. It was not well lit, and the floor was not as clean as the main hallways. She had walked it hundreds of times. When she was alone, she pulled out a secure communication device. It was small, no bigger than her thumb, and it connected to only one frequency in the entire galaxy. She pressed her thumb to the surface and waited. Admiral Yoon-taek answered in less than 3 seconds. His voice was calm, the way it always was, like a lake with no wind. "Ambassador." "They laughed," Jisoo said. "Just that. No anger, no sadness, just a fact." There was a pause on the other end. Then Taek said, "Understood. Iron Dawn?" "Iron Dawn," Jisoo confirmed. The line went dead. 8,000 light-years away, on Earth, deep inside a mountain, in a place that did not appear on any map, a screen lit up in front of Shinunji. She was sitting in a room full of people, who had been waiting for this signal for a very long time. Some of them had spent their entire careers preparing for it. Unji read the code on her screen 3 times to make sure. Then she turned to her team. "We are live," she said quietly. "Everything goes tonight." No one cheered. No one celebrated. They simply turned to their stations and began to work. There was too much to do, and not enough time to waste on feelings. That evening, the Galactic News Network ran a small headline across its ticker. "Earth Ambassador exits Council session early. No further comment from human delegation." It appeared between a story about a new restaurant on the Marathi homeworld and a sports update from the outer colonies. No one paid attention. No one thought it mattered. The crisis room underneath Seoul was built to survive anything. It sat 300 meters below the surface, wrapped in layers of concrete, steel, and materials that did not have public names. The room itself was simple. A long table, screens on every wall, 40 chairs, all filled. Admiral Yoon-taek stood at the head of the table. He was not a tall man, and he did not have a loud voice. But when he spoke, people listened, because he never wasted a single word. He looked around the room at the assembled admirals, directors, and intelligence chiefs of the United Earth government, and he said, "Iron Dawn is active. I will explain what that means." He pressed a button. The screens filled with data. "Iron Dawn is not an attack," Tech said. "It is a withdrawal. Starting at midnight UTC tonight, Earth will terminate every treaty, trade agreement, military pact, technology license, medical supply contract, and diplomatic channel we have signed with any galactic power over the past 42 years. The room was silent. Everyone here had known this day might come. Hearing it spoken aloud was different. Director Kwan Nari stood next. She was a small woman with short hair and glasses that she did not actually need, but wore anyway because she liked them. She was the director of Earth's Interstellar Commerce Bureau, and she knew more about galactic trade than most alien economists. She pulled up her own set of numbers. "Let me show you what we are to them," she said. "Human-engineered water purification systems currently serve 319 colony worlds across 6 species. 40% of all galactic freight is moved by human logistics crews or on human-designed shipping routes. Human pharmaceutical compounds are used to treat major diseases in 11 different species. Our encryption protocols protect the banking systems of the Buuri Consortium. Our early warning sensor networks cover the entire Tasari border region. Our atmospheric processors keep 3 Marathi colony worlds breathable." She paused and looked around the room. "We gave them all of this at junior species rates. Rates that were set by the Council, not by us. Rates that pay us roughly 1/5 of what any full member species would charge for the same services. They have been getting the best work in the galaxy at the cheapest price in the galaxy, and they have thanked us by laughing at our ambassador." She sat down. Nobody needed her to say anything else. At midnight, it began. Every human embassy in the galaxy went dark at the same moment. The lights turned off, the doors locked, the communication arrays powered down. Inside each embassy, small teams of staff followed procedures they had rehearsed dozens of times. Data cores were wiped, Classified documents were destroyed. Personal belongings were packed into bags. Within 2 hours, shuttles arrived to take every human diplomat off-world and back toward Earth. Trade ships were next. Human freighters carrying goods across dozens of shipping lanes received a single coded message. Every captain opened it, read it, and turned their ship around. Cargo pods that were mid-delivery were sealed with encryption codes that only human systems could open. Thousands of them were left floating in orbit around alien stations, locked tight, useless. On the Buri homeworld, Trade Lord Fennec was pulled from his sleep by his senior advisor. The advisor's golden fur was standing on end, which meant he was terrified. "The humans are gone," he said. Fennec sat up. "What do you mean, gone?" "Their embassy closed. Their trade ships turned around. The freight captains abandoned their contracts. We have 11,000 cargo pods in orbit, and no way to open them. The encryption is human-made. Our best codebreakers say it will take 2 years to crack a single pod." Fennec stared at him. "This is a negotiating trick. They will come back in a day and ask for better terms." "My lord, they wiped their data cores. They destroyed their embassy files. People who are planning to come back do not burn everything behind them." 3,000 light-years away, on the Tisari border, things were worse. The early warning systems that watched for threats from the Outer Rim had been maintained by human technicians for 15 years. When those technicians left, the systems kept running, but error codes began to appear almost immediately. Tisari engineers looked at the code and could not understand it. It was not that the code was hidden. It was that human engineering was simply different from theirs, built on methods they had never bothered to learn, because they had always assumed humans were not smart enough to create anything worth studying. Within 6 hours of midnight, the first emergency messages reached the Galactic Council. Legate Passan of the Reth Communion was the only alien leader who tried to contact the humans directly. He was a quiet being, shaped something like a tall bird with silver feathers and dark, thoughtful eyes. He had always treated Jisoo with respect, even when others did not. He reached her on a private channel. "Ambassador Han," he said carefully, "I must ask, can this be reversed?" Jisoo's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired but calm. "It could have been prevented, Legate. Prevention was cheap. It cost nothing more than basic respect. You all chose a different option." "I did not laugh at you, Ambassador." "No," Jisoo agreed, "but you also did not stop them." Passan had no answer for that. On the orbital station Mugunghwa, high above Earth, Admiral Take watched the reports come in. Human crews evacuated from Marathi colonies. Human medical staff recalled from Reth hospitals. Human engineers leaving Buri shipyards. It was the largest coordinated withdrawal in galactic history, and it was happening without a single shot fired, without a single angry word broadcast. In the early hours of the morning, Speaker Olvin of the Marathi was woken by his chief of staff. Reports were pouring in from 9 different sectors. Trade disruptions, system failures, diplomatic channels gone silent. "What are the humans doing?" Olvin asked, still half asleep. His aide looked at the reports and answered with a voice that had lost all of its usual confidence. "Leaving, Speaker. All of them. Everywhere." Olvin sat in silence for a long time. Outside his window, the stars looked exactly the same as they always had. But something in the galaxy had shifted, and even he could feel it. 72 hours after Iron Dawn, the galaxy began to understand what it had lost. It did not happen all at once. It happened in small ways first, like cracks spreading through glass. A water purifier failing on a Marathi colony. A shipping route with no one to manage it. A hospital running low on medicine that only human factories produced. Each problem on its own was small. Together, they were a disaster. On the Marathi colony world of Ethavan, The atmospheric processors stopped working on the third day. These were massive machines, each one the size of a small city, that pulled poison from the air and replaced it with something the Marathi could breathe. Humans had designed them, built them, and maintained them for 12 years. The machines were not broken. They had simply entered their scheduled maintenance cycle and locked themselves, waiting for the human technicians who always came to service them. Those technicians were now on a ship heading back to Earth. The Marathi governor of Ethavan sent an emergency message to the council. 6 million colonists lived on that world. Without the processors, the air would become toxic within 90 days. Marathi engineers were brought in. They opened the machines and stared at the insides like children looking at the engine of a starship. The technology was not secret. It was not hidden behind codes or locks. It was simply so far beyond what they had expected from humans that they did not know where to begin. One of the engineers, after 3 days of failed attempts, said something that would later become famous across the galaxy. "We did not think they were this good. We never looked." On the Bawuri homeworld, the financial markets collapsed on the second day. The Bawuri were the richest species in the galaxy. Their banks held more wealth than most civilizations produced in a century. And their entire banking system ran on human-made encryption. Not because humans had forced it on them, because it was better than anything the Bawuri had, and it was cheap. The Bawuri had been so focused on profit that they never considered what would happen if the species providing their security simply walked away. Trade Lord Fennec called an emergency meeting of the consortium's ruling board. He was furious. His golden fur was flat against his skin, which meant he was scared, though he would never admit it. "How did we let one species touch everything?" he shouted at his advisors. None of them had an answer. The truth was simple. Humans were good at what they did, and they were willing to work for almost nothing. It had been too easy to let them do everything. No one had thought about what that meant. The Tessari Dominion responded differently. War Marshal Duca did not panic. He called his generals into a room and told them to prepare a military option. If the humans would not come back willingly, the Tessari would take what they needed by force. His intelligence chief, a scarred old soldier named Wrath, put a report on the table. "Before we discuss force," Wrath said, "you need to see this." The report was about something called Project Blacktide. Tessari intelligence had known for years that humans were placing small platforms in deep space. The platforms were tiny, no bigger than a shuttle, and they were nearly invisible to sensors. The Tessari had assumed they were scientific instruments. They were wrong. "There are thousands of them," Wrath said. "They are spread across every major sector of the galaxy. We do not know exactly what they do, but in the last 72 hours, they have all activated. Every single one." Duca looked at the map. The platforms were everywhere, near Tessari fleet bases, along Buri trade routes, around Marathi colonies, in the empty spaces between stars, where no one ever looked. "Are they weapons?" Duca asked. "We do not think so," Wrath said carefully. "We think they are sensors, communication relays, navigation aids. We think the humans have been quietly holding parts of our infrastructure together for years without telling anyone. And now? Now they can take it apart whenever they want." Duca sat back in his chair and said nothing for a long time. On the edge of Tessari space, Captain Bay Doha guided the UN Jindo through the last stretch of the evacuation corridor. The Jindo was a stealth destroyer, small and fast, and nearly impossible to detect. Doha was escorting a convoy of civilian transports carrying the last human families out of Tessari territory. A Tessari patrol fleet moved to block them. 6 warships, each one 20 times the size of the Jindo. Their commander opened a channel and ordered the convoy to stop. Doha answered the call herself. She was a woman of few words, with a calm face and steady hands. "Tessari Patrol, this is Captain Bay Doha of the UN Jindo. We are escorting civilians through open space under legal withdrawal protocols. Move aside. You are in Tasari territory. You will surrender your vessels for inspection. Doha did not blink. You can let us pass, or you can find out what your own stations look like from the inside, when the lights go off. It was not a bluff. 3 Tasari border stations had already lost power for 11 minutes the day before. Humans had built their backup generators. The Tasari commander knew this. He ordered his ships to move aside. The convoy passed without another word. Back on Earth, Shin Unji sat in her control room and watched the Black Tide network on her screens. Thousands of green dots spread across a map of the galaxy, each one a small platform doing its quiet work. She had spent 8 years building this network. Most people on Earth did not know it existed. The aliens certainly did not understand it. The platforms were not weapons. They were something more dangerous. They were proof. Proof that humanity had been holding the galaxy together with invisible hands for decades. And now those hands were pulling away, gently, carefully, letting the galaxy feel every single place where it had leaned on Earth without knowing it. On the Reth homeworld, in a children's hospital, a doctor searched through his supply room for a compound called HPC7. It was a human-made enzyme used to treat a blood disease common in Reth children. The hospital had always received regular shipments from Earth. A last shipment never arrived. The doctor looked at his remaining supply and did the math. He had enough for 9 days. He sat down at his desk and put his head in his hands. He had never thought about where the medicine came from. It had always just been there. That was the thing about humans. The galaxy was learning. They had always just been there. And no one had ever thought to say thank you. 1 week after Iron Dawn, Speaker Ulvin called a grand summit. In the entire history of the Galactic Council, a grand summit had been called only 4 times before. Twice for wars that threatened to destroy civilizations. Once for a plague that crossed species barriers. Once for the discovery of a dead galaxy where all life had vanished. Now it was called for the 5th time, and the reason was a single species that had simply stopped helping. The Grand Rotunda was full. Every seat was taken. Delegates who normally sent assistance had come in person. The air in the chamber felt heavy, charged with something between fear and anger. On the screens above the chamber, news tickers showed the damage. Trade losses across the galaxy had passed 12 trillion credits. 2 minor wars had started in sectors where human-maintained peacekeeping systems had gone dark. The Marathi colony of Ethavon had declared an emergency. Buri banks were failing. Speaker Ulvin opened the summit from his high podium. He was dressed in formal robes, his blue glass skin catching the light. He spoke in the slow, careful way he always did. But Jisoo, watching from a screen on Earth, noticed something new in his voice. It was the sound of a man trying very hard to appear calm. This summit has been called to address the unprovoked and hostile withdrawal of the human species from all galactic agreements, Ulvin began. Earth's actions have caused significant harm to member worlds, and must be treated as an act of aggression against the Council itself. A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. Heads nodded. Fists were pressed against podiums. It felt good to be angry. It felt better than being afraid. Then Legate Possum stood. The Reth diplomat rose from his seat slowly, his silver feathers catching the light. He was not a loud person. He did not shout or wave his arms. He simply stood, and the chamber grew quiet, because Possum was known as the most honest voice in the council, and when he spoke, it usually meant something important. Speaker Ulvin, Possum said, I must correct the record. What Earth has done is not aggression. It is not hostile. It is not even unusual. Every treaty Earth signed contained a legal withdrawal clause. These clauses were written by this council, not by humans. The notice periods required for withdrawal were set by this council. They were made deliberately short because, and I quote from the original council records, the provisional member species is unlikely to ever invoke these provisions. He paused to let that sink in. Earth followed every procedure, every notice period, every legal requirement. They did not break a single law. What they did was something we never imagined they would do. They used the rules we wrote against us. And we are angry, not because they did something wrong, but because we are suffering the consequences of our own arrogance. The chamber was silent. Trade Lord Fennec broke it. His voice was sharp and high. Regardless of legal details, Earth must be sanctioned. They are causing harm to member worlds. Children are going without medicine. Colonies are losing atmosphere. This cannot be allowed. Possum turned to face Fennec directly. Sanction for what, Trade Lord? For no longer giving us things we never paid fairly for? For refusing to continue working at rates that your consortium sets specifically to exploit their junior status? Shall we sanction them for the crime of having dignity? Fennec opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it again. War Marshal Ducka spoke next. He did not stand. He simply spoke from his seat, his deep voice filling the chamber without effort. I am not interested in legal arguments. I am interested in solutions. I propose a military response. We take what we need. His own general, Wrath, stepped forward and activated a display. The map of the galaxy appeared above the chamber, and on it, thousands of small red dots. These are the Black Tide platforms, Wrath said. Human-deployed sensor and relay stations spread across every major sector. They activated 1 week ago. They have not done anything hostile, but our analysts have concluded that these platforms have been mapping every fleet movement, every defense gap, every supply line, and every communication channel in the galaxy for approximately 20 years. The chamber went very still. If humanity wanted to wage war, Wrath continued, they would not need to fire a single weapon. They could sell this data to any faction's enemies. They could shut down navigation in entire sectors. They could blind our early warning systems. They have not done any of these things, but they could. Ducka looked at Wrath. Then he looked at the map. Then he sat back and said nothing more about military options. Speaker Alvin, sensing the shift in the room, made a decision he clearly did not want to make. The Council invites Ambassador Han Ji-soo of Earth to address this summit. The main doors of the rotunda opened. Ji-soo walked in alone. She wore a simple dark suit, no jewelry, no symbols of rank. She walked past the provisional member podium without looking at it, and continued to the center of the main floor, where full members stood to address the council. No one stopped her. No one said a word. She stood in the center of the largest room in the galaxy, and looked up at 412 species looking down at her. 42 years ago, she began, her voice quiet but clear. Earth reached the stars, and found that we were not alone. We were overjoyed. We came to this council with open hands. We offered everything we had. Our technology, our labor, our medicine, our creativity. We asked for one thing in return, to be treated as equals. She paused. You said no. You said we were too young, too small, too primitive. You gave us a provisional status that was meant to be temporary, and then made sure it never changed. And while you kept us in the lowest seat in this chamber, you took everything we offered. You let us build your water systems, run your shipping lanes, protect your borders, and heal your sick. You let us do all of this because we were cheap, and because we were good at it, and because it never occurred to you that the species standing at the smallest podium might be the one holding everything together. She looked directly at Alvin. You told us we were small. You were right. We are a single species from a single world. But you built your house on our back, Speaker. You built it on our back, and never once looked down to see what was holding it up. She took a breath. We are not asking for war. We are not asking for revenge. We are simply standing up, and your house has no foundation without us." She turned and walked out. No questions, no negotiation, no looking back. The chamber sat in silence for a long time. Finally, War Marshal Ducka leaned toward Posson, who sat nearby, and spoke in a voice low enough that only the legate could hear. "I was wrong about them," Ducka said. "That is the most dangerous kind of enemy, one that does not need to fight." Posson nodded slowly. "They are not our enemy, War Marshal. That is what makes this so much worse. They were our friends, and we treated them like servants." 3 weeks after Iron Dawn, the galaxy came to Earth. It was a thing that had never happened before. In the entire history of interstellar diplomacy, senior alien leaders had never visited a provisional member world. There had never been a reason to. Provisional members came to the Council, not the other way around. They waited in the small corridors and stood at the low podiums and accepted whatever was offered to them. That was how it had always worked. But the galaxy was falling apart, and the ones who could fix it were not coming to the Council anymore. So the Council had to go to them. Speaker Olvin traveled to Earth personally. It took him 4 days by fast courier, and during those 4 days, 3 more Buri banks collapsed. The Tesari lost contact with an entire border sector when a human-maintained relay network shut down, and the Marathi colony of Ethavan began rationing breathable air. Olvin spent most of the journey staring out the window at the stars, saying nothing to his staff. Trade Lord Fennec came because his consortium was bleeding money so fast that his own board had threatened to remove him if he did not fix this. War Marshal Ducka came because his generals told him plainly that the Tesari military could not function without the systems humans had built for them, and that fighting Earth would be like punching the only doctor in the room. Legate Posson came because he was the closest thing the humans had to a friend among the Council species, and because he felt he owed it to them to be present. They landed in the city of Busan, on the southern coast of the Korean peninsula. Earth had chosen the location carefully. It was not the capital. It was not a military base. It was a port city, beautiful and ordinary, with mountains on one side and the sea on the other. The message was clear. Earth was not trying to impress anyone. This was simply home. The meeting was held in a conference room overlooking the harbor. The room was clean and bright, with large windows and a simple wooden table. There were no flags, no ceremonial objects, no displays of power, just chairs, water, and daylight. On one side of the table sat the alien delegation. Speaker Olvin, tall and rigid in his formal robes. Fennec, his golden fur groomed perfectly, his small eyes darting around the room. Ducka, massive and silent, his iron-colored armor reflecting the sunlight. Posson, calm as always, his silver feathers folded neatly against his body. On the other side sat 3 humans. Admiral Yoon Tak, in a plain Navy uniform. Director Kwan Nari, in a gray suit with her unnecessary glasses. And Ambassador Han Jisoo, who looked like she had finally slept for the first time in 3 weeks. He had prepared a formal offer, and he read it from a document with the careful precision of someone who was not used to giving things away. Full council membership for Earth. A formal apology for the provisional status that had lasted 4 decades. Restoration of all previous agreements under improved terms. He slid the document across the table. Jisoo picked it up, read it slowly, and then slid it back. "This is what you should have given us 40 years ago," she said. "We are past that now." Olvin's blue glass skin seemed to darken slightly. "And what does Earth want?" Nari opened a thin folder and laid out 5 pages. She explained each one in the same calm, factual tone she used for everything, as if she were reading a grocery list instead of reshaping the political order of the galaxy. First, full membership with permanent standing on the Security Council. No more provisional status for any species. Ever. The system that had been used to keep Earth and others beneath the older civilizations would be dismantled completely. Second, fair market compensation for all human-provided services going back 5 years. Every water purifier, every shipping route, every medical compound, every line of encryption code, all of it repriced at the rates any full member species would have charged. Third, a Galactic Infrastructure Transparency Act. Every species' contributions to the common systems of the galaxy would be documented, made public, and fairly compensated. Never again would one civilization quietly hold everything together, while being treated as if it contributed nothing. Fourth, the Black Tide Network would remain active. It would operate as an independent monitoring system, run by humanity, answering to no single faction. It would serve as a check on power, a way to ensure that no species could secretly build up forces or manipulate infrastructure without the rest of the galaxy knowing about it. Fifth, a formal public statement from the Council, admitting that Earth had been deliberately held in subordinate status for political reasons, and a complete restructuring of the membership process to prevent it from happening to any future species. Fennec was the first to react. "This is outrageous," he said. "You are asking us to pay for services we have already received. You are asking us to give you power over our own security systems. You are asking us to humiliate ourselves in front of the entire galaxy." Nari looked at him. She opened her datapad and turned it so Fennec could see the screen. On it was a single graph showing the projected collapse of the Bawuri economy over the next 30 days. The line went down like a cliff. "You are welcome to refuse," Nari said simply. Fennec stared at the graph. He said nothing more. The room was quiet. Olvin looked at his delegation. Fennec was pale beneath his fur. Passun was nodding slowly, as if he had expected this. And Dukkha, the great war marshal who had once called humans cradle dirt, leaned forward and spoke. "Sign it," Dukkha said to Olvin. His voice was flat and final. "They have beaten us without a single weapon. Sign it before they decide to use one." Olvin looked at Dukkha, then at Jisoo, then at the document on the table. He picked up a pen, the old-fashioned kind that humans still used, and he signed his name at the bottom of each page. Fennec signed next, his hand shaking slightly. Dukkha signed with a firm, quick stroke. Passun signed last, and when he finished, he looked across the table at Jisoo and gave a small nod. They called it the Busan Accord. After the signing, the aliens were escorted to their ships. The meeting had lasted less than 2 hours. 42 years of injustice, resolved in the time it takes to eat lunch. That evening, Jisoo stood on a balcony of the conference building, looking out at the sea. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. She was alone for the first time in weeks, and the silence felt strange. She had forgotten what it sounded like. Footsteps behind her. She turned to see Passun approaching. The Reth diplomat moved quietly for someone his size. He came to stand beside her at the railing, and looked out at the water. "Your world is beautiful," he said. "It is," Jisoo agreed. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Passun spoke again. "May I ask you something honestly?" "Of course." "Did you ever doubt it would work? All of this? Iron Dawn, the withdrawal? Did you ever think it might fail?" Jisoo was quiet for a long time. "I did not sleep for the first week," she said. "Every night I lay awake thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if they called our bluff? What if they decided to attack instead of negotiate? What if people got hurt because of what we did? But you did it anyway. We had no choice. We could not spend another 40 years standing at that podium, being laughed at, while we held their worlds together with our bare hands. At some point, you have to decide that you are worth more than what others say you are." Passun nodded slowly. "The galaxy laughed at your world," he said softly. Jisoo watched the last light of the sun disappear below the horizon. The first stars were appearing, faint and distant. Somewhere up there, among those stars, the black tide platforms were humming quietly. The Busan Accord was being transmitted to every corner of known space, and the galaxy was waking up to a new reality. "The galaxy can laugh all it wants," she said. "We were never performing for them." The next morning, the Galactic News Network ran its lead story. It was not buried between restaurant reviews and sports scores this time. It filled every screen on every world. The species once ranked last among council members has, in 21 days, reshaped the political order of the known galaxy. The Busan Accord, signed on the human homeworld of Earth, grants humanity full membership, Security Council standing, and retroactive compensation for decades of service. When asked for comment, Earth's ambassador offered only 2 words: